The conference room aboard the USS Valor felt less like a room and more like a pressure chamber where every breath carried weight. The air vibrated with the low hum of engines churning somewhere deep beneath the steel deck, the constant thrum that reminded everyone aboard that this ship wasn't just floating. It was alive, alert, and bracing for decisions that shaped nations. Blue glow screens pulsed across the walls, displaying maps, encrypted data feeds, classified satellite imagery, and a constantly updating threat index that crept upward like a heartbeat heading toward cardiac arrest. But the tension didn't come from the walls, it came from the people. High-ranking officers from multiple branches, each decorated with enough medals to rattle with their movements. They stood in clusters, murmuring strategies, trading uneasy glances, occasionally glancing at the lone figure who stood quietly beside the digital war table. She didn't fit the expected image. Not the graying commander type nor the brash, swaggering lieutenant stereotype that walked onto ships ready to prove themselves. Instead, the woman carried stillness, controlled, poised, like someone who understood chaos intimately and had learned to silence it. Her raven black hair was tied into a no-nonsense bun, her uniform precise and clean despite clear evidence of field wear. Her name patch read Solace, but nobody in that room had ever heard her name spoken aloud before today. It was this unfamiliarity that gnawed at them, clearance that outranked nearly everyone in the room, but a face they'd never seen. Then Admiral Jacob Hayes marched in. His presence changed the atmosphere instantly. He was a man carved out of battle history, shoulders broad, posture straight, jaw set like iron. He wore the uniform of a Navy SEAL commander with an ease earned over decades. Rumors followed him like shadows, missions he led, lives he saved, stories whispered in barracks about his brutal honesty and unmatched instincts. Hayes was respected, feared, and, more than anything, impossible to intimidate. He scanned the room with his trademark smirk. "Where's this mystery officer they dragged me out of training for?" He asked loudly, half joking. "I hear she outranks everyone, including the coffee machine." Laughter bubbled among the officers, forced and uneasy. Then he spotted her, Mira Solace, standing straight, silent, unbothered by his theatrics. Hayes approached, his boots thudding against the deck. He towered over her by nearly a foot, his expression playful as he attempted to break the ice. "All right, Lieutenant or Captain, or whatever you are," he said with a grin. "What's your rank exactly?" She turned her head slightly and met his gaze without flinching. Her dark eyes were steady, too steady, and for a moment Hayes saw something there that made him hesitate. But he dismissed it, leaning into the joke. Her voice was calm, unshaken, "Fleet Commander," and just like that, the room fell silent, not the polite silence of respect, but the suffocating vacuum that sucks the air out of lungs. Hayes' grin evaporated. His eyes widened just slightly, then more. His heart lurched as he stared at her. Fleet Commander, that rank wasn't casually handed out. It wasn't earned through one heroic mission. It was earned through hundreds of decisions that affected entire strike groups, entire fleets. The title belonged to legends carved into history books, not to officers under 40 wearing humble, unadorned uniforms. He took an involuntary step back, his hand gripping the war table for balance. "You're joking," he said, but the truth echoed in her eyes. "I wish I were," she replied quietly. Her words weren't dramatic. They carried a heaviness that made even the bravest officers stiffen. Mira stepped forward and activated a holographic display. Red threat markers flared across the map. "They're coming for the Valor tonight," she said, "and you're not prepared." Hayes' breath caught in his throat. Intuition, his trusted compass, flared warning alarms. He had spent his life reading danger before it struck, and every fiber of his being knew she wasn't bluffing. The Admiral straightened, the shock drying from his eyes, replaced by steel. "Explain," he commanded. She looked at him with a gravity that felt almost war-born. "Sir, we don't have time for disbelief, only time to act." And just like that, the tone of the room shifted. The battle had already begun, and none of them knew it yet. Hours before she stepped onto the deck of the USS Valor, Mira Solace had been locked inside a covert operations bunker, buried beneath an unmarked command facility in Nevada. The bunker, lit only by cold blue monitors, hummed with the sound of data streams pouring in from satellites, reconnaissance drones, and unsecured enemy chatter. Mira stood alone in front of the central screen, watching encrypted transmissions scroll like a dark storm cloud forming in digital space. Her team, known only by a single code name, Ghost Tide, did not exist on official rosters. Their dossiers were sealed under presidential authority. Even generals had no clearance. Mira had been summoned in the middle of the night by a direct call from the National Security Advisor. The situation was dire. An unnamed Black Ops syndicate had begun coordinating with rogue units across 3 continents, sharing encrypted navigation logs, naval patterns, and patrol routes of American vessels. Mira saw it clearly. The USS Valor wasn't just a target. It was the heart of a larger attack meant to cripple naval command entirely. As she traced the data trail, she felt a familiar knot tightening in her stomach. The enemy wasn't just good. They were meticulous. They knew exactly where the Valor would be, down to the minute. That level of accuracy was impossible unless someone was leaking intel from the inside. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. When she pressed the final decryption sequence, a red marker blinked onto the map. A digital signature routed through one of the Valor's own encrypted channels. Her breath stilled. Someone aboard the ship had been transmitting sensitive route information to the enemy for months. She didn't have the luxury of shock. She forwarded the evidence to Presidential Command and requested immediate override access. It was granted instantly. The authority she now carried, Fleet Commander, wasn't just a title. It was a weapon given only when the chain of command could no longer be trusted. With no escort, no public announcement, and absolute secrecy, she boarded a covert jet that dropped her onto the Valor before dawn. She walked aboard knowing she would face resistance. She expected skepticism. She expected distrust. But what she didn't expect was Admiral Hayes himself, towering, sharp-tongued, famously impossible to intimidate, treating her rank like a joke. Back in the war room, after the shock of her revelation sank in, Mira opened the encrypted files for everyone to see. Lines of code scrolled, coordinates mapped, transmissions highlighted. The room darkened as the satellite feed projected onto the center wall. There, she pointed. That's the breach point. The enemy infiltrated your communications through a compromised relay, one that was supposed to be accessible only by your officers, Admiral. Hayes' jaw clenched. How the hell did they get that clearance? Because they didn't hack it, Mira answered. They were given it. The accusation hung in the air like a thundercloud. The officers erupted. Voices overlapping, denial, disbelief, anger. Chairs scraped back. Arms waved in heated arguments. Hayes slammed his palm on the table. Enough. A silence fell, and then he looked at her with a combination of fear and fury. You understand what you're saying? She nodded. Yes, someone on this ship is working with them. Someone trusted. Someone with high-level access. Hayes' throat tightened. His SEAL instinct screamed that she was right, but the implications twisted like a knife. Do you know who? He asked. No, she said. Not yet. She zoomed into the satellite feed, showing a dark shape approaching underwater. But I know when they will strike. Midnight. Using a submersible insertion team under electromagnetic cloaking. They'll disable external sensors before your system even registers movement. Hayes stared at the map, his shoulders squared but his eyes fractured with realization. We didn't see any of this, he murmured. Mira finally turned to him. This man decorated with medals, feared by enemies, respected by elites. You weren't supposed to see it, she said. They wanted you blind. Hayes forced himself to swallow the insult to his pride, replacing it with strategic clarity. He looked at her with something different now, not resistance, not doubt, but reluctant respect. You're really a fleet commander, he said more quietly. She nodded once. Promoted after Ghost Tide saved the Pacific Strike Group last year. Classified, no formal announcement. He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as a stranger, not as an anomaly, but as a commander forged by hell and secrecy. Hayes exhaled, a shift settling inside him. All right, he said, voice steady. Tell me what we do next. Mira didn't miss a beat. We prepare for war, and we lock this ship down from the inside out. For the first time, Admiral Hayes understood. The threat wasn't coming. It was already here. Midnight arrived not with the quiet calm of a sleeping ocean, but with a heartbeat, thundering, heavy, pulsing through the steel deck of the USS Valor. The ship rocked gently against dark waves, cloaked by the vastness of the open sea. But Mira Salas knew better. Silence wasn't peace. Silence was camouflage. Silence was the enemy's favorite weapon. At 23:57 hours, she stood on the command bridge, eyes fixed on the perimeter sensors she personally reconfigured just hours ago. Her mind ticked with the precision of a tactical algorithm. She tracked movements that weren't yet visible to the naked eye, disturbances in water density, irregular pressure shifts, patterns that her training had taught her to spot years before technology caught up. "Everyone to stations," she ordered into the intercom, voice low but commanding. No panic, no hesitation. The crew obeyed instantly now. They'd seen enough to trust her. Even Hayes moved without question, the doubt that once clouded his judgment now replaced with unwavering purpose. At exactly midnight, the first breach occurred, a faint ripple in the motion sensors, too faint for automated detection. But Mira had anticipated that. She slammed her palm on the emergency alert button. All hands, battle positions, red sirens blazed across the ship. Floodlights snapped on, illuminating the deck with blinding brilliance. The ocean exploded with silhouettes as masked infiltrators climbed the hull like shadow spiders. The enemy had arrived swift and silent, as predicted. Hayes burst onto the deck, weapon drawn, shouting commands that echoed through the roar of boots and wind. Positions, cover the east flank, move, but Mira was already ahead of him. She dashed across the deck, boots pounding metal. Her tactical suit gleamed under the lights, cutting a sharp silhouette against the smoke, beginning to rise from the first wave of suppressed gunfire. She moved with precision, every step calculated, every turn strategic. She shouted orders to squads before the enemy even emerged from their blind spots. Sniper tower, 2 hostiles left side, seal breach point 4, they'll circle back. Team Delta, push forward 10 meters. Her voice carried authority that silenced confusion. A burst of bullets cracked the night. Mira dove behind a crate as sparks erupted inches from her head. She rolled to the side, sprang up, and fired a warning shot, not at an attacker, but at a dark object drifting toward the hull. A magnetic EMP mine. Hayes saw it too late. Mira didn't. She lunged toward it, kicked it off the ledge before it could latch, and the thing detonated harmlessly in open water, sending a shockwave that rocked the ship. Hayes stared, breath frozen. She had just saved the Valor in one motion, but the fight wasn't over. More attackers swarmed the deck, moving in terrifying synchronization. Mira's predictions came true. The enemy had coordinated their assault using data stolen from within. They knew the ship's weak spots, blind corners, and patrol gaps, yet Mira countered every move as though she'd been rehearsing this moment for years. Smoke thickened, swirling in violent streams. Mira broke into a sprint again, weaving through debris, firing controlled shots. A SEAL fell near her, injured, bleeding. Without breaking stride, she knelt, applied pressure to his wound, and dragged him to safety before diving back into battle. Her courage was surgical, precise. Not reckless, strategic. Hayes watched from the upper deck, chest heaving, eyes locked on her as she commanded SEAL teams with unnatural foresight. Her instincts were too sharp, too fast. She seemed to know where the enemy would strike seconds before they emerged. He had fought alongside the best. None matched her. Finally, after 27 relentless minutes, the tide turned. The infiltrators faltered, overwhelmed by the coordinated strike Mira orchestrated. The last hostile collapsed under a coordinated barrage of disciplined fire. The deck vibrated under the sudden stillness as the gunfire faded, replaced by the hiss of smoke drifting into the sea breeze. Bodies lay motionless, every attacker incapacitated. SEAL medics rushed in. Crew members checked systems. Emergency teams extinguished fires, and Mira Salas stood at the center of it all, breathing hard, eyes scanning the perimeter, refusing to relax. She waited for one last threat. One last movement. She didn't trust silence until she made sure it belonged to them. Hayes walked toward her, boots crunching on scattered debris. Exhaustion lined his face, but respect burned in his eyes, raw and unfiltered. "Fleet Commander," he said softly, voice rough with awe and disbelief, "you saved us tonight." She turned, her eyes held no triumph, only the weight of someone who had seen too many battles, survived too many losses. "No," she said quietly, "we saved each other. You stood with your men, I stood with mine." Hayes nodded slowly, absorbing her words. The ship creaked under the settling waves. "Where do we go from here?" he asked. Mira looked at the dark horizon, far beyond where the infiltrators came from, into the unseen world of shadows and secrets. "Into the dark," she said, "because that's where the next threat already waits." And in that moment, as the night wind surged and dawn's first faint light edged the sky, Hayes knew one truth with absolute certainty: he had just fought alongside a legend.